All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a process that most people have heard of, but very few actually understand: mortgage foreclosure. Specifically, what happens when it goes to court. We're going to walk through the entire legal playbook step by step using something called Rule 68 as our guide. I mean, it's a situation nobody ever wants to think about, right? But what are the rules of the game? What really happens when a bank decides to sue? We're going to break down every single step, from that first lawsuit all the way to the final last-ditch chance to save a home.
So, it all starts with one big decision. The lender looks at the account, decides the debt isn't getting paid, and says, all right, it's time to go to court. This is where our story begins.
Now, the key word here is judicial. This is super important. We're not talking about some simple administrative paperwork here. No, this is a full-blown lawsuit. It's happening in a courtroom with a judge, and it's all governed by a very specific set of rules. You see, a lender basically has two paths they can choose. There's the extrajudicial route, which is kind of like the foreclosure fast lane. It's quicker and doesn't need a court case. But what we're focusing on today is the other path, judicial foreclosure. This is the slower, more formal journey that plays out entirely inside a courtroom. Okay, so let's talk about the document that officially kicks this whole thing off, the complaint. And believe me, this isn't just any legal filing. It has to follow a really strict recipe to even get looked at by the court. So how in the world do lawyers remember all the things that have to be in this complaint? Well, they use this powerful and, okay, a little morbid, mnemonic, dead man. It's a pretty unforgettable way to make sure every single critical piece of info is there. And each letter in dead man stands for something that is absolutely non-negotiable. You've got the date the mortgage was signed, the evidence of the loan itself, the exact amount owed, a clear description of the property. It basically covers the who, what, where, and how much of the entire dispute. And this is where that N for names becomes so important. So imagine Juan gets a mortgage from a bank. But then he needs more cash, so he gets a second, smaller loan from his friend Pedro using the same house as collateral. When the bank sues Juan, they absolutely have to include Pedro in that lawsuit. Why? Because you've got to sort out Pedro's rights and make sure the property title is totally clean for whoever buys it next. If the bank forgets Pedro, their whole case could fall apart. It's a fatal error. So let's fast forward. The court case moves along, the judge makes a ruling, and the property is scheduled for a public auction. This is really the moment of truth, where that physical asset, the house, gets turned back into cold, hard cash. Now, when that auction money comes in, it is not a free-for-all. Not at all. The law has a very strict pecking order, like a cascade that dictates exactly who gets paid and in what order. Okay, check this out. Let's say Juan's house sells for 8 million pesos. The very first slice of that pie doesn't go to the bank. It actually goes to pay for the sale itself, administrative fees, publication costs. Then the main lender gets their 5 million. After them, our junior lender, Pedro, gets his 1 million. And only after everyone else is paid, whatever is left over, in this case, a pretty surprising 1.9 million, actually goes back to Juan, the original borrower. But, life isn't always so neat and tidy. What happens if the auction doesn't bring in enough money? Or what if the debt is structured in a complicated way? Well, the rules have an answer for that too. This is a really critical idea. Just because the house is sold doesn't mean the debt just vanishes. If the house sells for less than what was owed, the lender can go back to court and get what's called a deficiency judgment. That means they can legally go after the borrower's other assets to collect the rest of the money. And here's another interesting scenario. What about installment loans? Well, if the property can be divided up, say it's a huge farm, the court might sell off just a small piece to cover a missed payment. But if the property is indivisible, like a hotel, well, you can't just sell the lobby, right? The entire hotel has to be sold at once to cover all the payments, both the ones that are past due and the ones that are still to come. All right, we've now reached the final, and I'd argue the most crucial part of this entire process. Seriously, this is the expert level stuff. Understanding this part is what separates someone who kind of gets foreclosure from someone who really gets it. So the auction is done, a winning bidder is declared. It feels like it's all over. Game over. But is it? Well, the law actually provides one last critical window of opportunity. The trick is knowing which window you're allowed to use. First up, we have the equity of redemption. The best way to think about this is like your chance to stop the train before it ever leaves the station.
Even though the auction has happened, as long as the judge hasn't signed the final paperwork confirming the sale, the borrower can swoop in with the full amount owed and just stop the whole thing. The sale is canceled and they keep their property. Now, do not get that confused with the right of redemption. This is a completely different animal. In this case, the property has already been sold. The title has been transferred to the new owner. This right gives the original borrower a chance to legally buy back the property from the winner of the auction, usually within 1 year. Okay, let's put these two head to head. The equity of redemption, that's our guy for judicial foreclosures. It happens before the sale is final, and it's all about preventing the sale. The right of redemption, on the other hand, is usually for those faster extrajudicial cases. It happens after the sale, and it's about buying back the property. They are not interchangeable. But just when you think you've got it all straight, the law throws a massive curveball. There is one huge exception to this rule. If the lender in a judicial foreclosure, the court process, is a bank, a special law kicks in, and it gives the borrower that 1-year right of redemption, the ability to buy the property back after the sale. It's a total game changer. So that really leaves us with a final question to chew on. One right lets you stop the process dead in its tracks before it's truly over. The other gives you a chance to undo it after the fact. It really makes you think, if you were in that difficult spot, which one of those lifelines would you rather have? Which one holds the real power?